The following is a heartbreaking story of male to female transitioner who is experiencing major complication and deep regret after sex reassignment surgery. Viewer and listener discretion is advised.
Wanted to ask if anyone who had undergone male to female sex reassignment surgery encountered any sort of urinary complications? And if so, what was done and the treatment you had done? I am 1.5 years post-op. I encountered urinary complications immediately after removal of the catheter. My urethra felt constricted and tight. I had to strain to pee. I wasn't emptying my bladder at all. I left the hospital and flew back home with a swollen urethra. Upon my return home, my urethra was completely shut. I had complete urinary retention. I had to go into the emergency, and the urologist on call started poking and puncturing holes to find the opening of my urethra with a wire. He said if he wasn't able to find my urethra, that he would have put a tube through my abdomen, suprapubic. Thank God. After the third attempt, he finally was able to find my urethra, and a catheter was reinserted back in me. I was alone and completely traumatized that night. I left the hospital drenched with urine and blood. I cried all that evening till morning, thinking, what have I done to myself? After a week and a half on the catheter, I was able to find a urologist in my city that specializes in urinary complications after sex change surgery. I went to see him, and he removed the catheter, and for the first time ever I was able to urinate. But the story doesn't end there. All that poking and puncturing in the ER over time caused my urethra to narrow and close up due to scar tissue buildup, so I had to go back into surgery to fix and keep open the meatus of my urethra. Long story short, I'm still having urinary issues. At times I feel my urethra tube is constricted and tight, and I have to self-catheterize myself so to air it out in order to start my urine stream. Looking back at all of this, I regret my surgery. I miss how effortlessly peeing was. Literally before the surgery, I can go in and out of a bathroom in 1 minute without thinking twice. Today, it takes complete effort and hygiene. We take things for granted in life. Knowing that I know now, if I could turn back time, I would have not have gotten bottom surgery. It really has taken a toll on my body physically and mentally. I have moments of deep depression, and it has affected my quality of life. But it's stories like this that need to be shared and not sugar-coated because I experienced it. I don't wish what I went through on anyone.
Here are some of the responses to the post. The link to the original post will be pinned in the comment section down below.
I am about 3.5 months post-op. I have had difficulties urinating ever since the catheter was first pulled post-op. I was unable to empty my bladder properly, which led to a series of bladder infections. I could pee, but it felt like the way out was constricted. 6 weeks after my op, I ended up in the ER and got taken to the urology ER due to constriction that was being made worse by the bladder infection. The doctor was unfamiliar with my operation and was not keen to deal with me, and he was right to hesitate. However, he did decide to look at me, and whilst trying to find the urethral opening, he managed to tear the new vulva in 2 places. The worst being over the newly built meatus, which is exit of the urethra. Over the next week, it got harder and harder for me to pee, which turned into a complete failure. It turned out that as the damage healed after a week, the entire urethral opening closed up. I decided to go to the same hospital where I had been operated to have this looked at after my bad experience at the local hospital. Sadly, my surgeon was not available, and 3 urology colleagues tried and failed to insert a urethral catheter. It was extremely painful. I still have nightmares about it, and it felt more like torture than medicine. Eventually, after several painful attempts of literally shoving the catheter through flesh, it was decided to give me a suprapubic catheter. This one goes through the tummy and directly into the bladder. The insertion of this requires a needle to be inserted through the abdomen and through the flesh into the bladder, then it is slowly withdrawn and a local anesthetic is applied. Then a tube is inserted through into the bladder. This was the worst medical experience I think I've ever had. That entire day is just a complete PTSD-inducing nightmare. I then had my revision last week. Part of the revision was standard, in that most sex change operations in my country are done in 2 stages. There was a 1 centimeter blockage of the urethral opening that was reopened. The stricture was for some reason overlooked, and it is still there. One of the tears seems to have been ignored. I was expecting to have it stitched up. And overall, I'm extremely disappointed and frustrated that the stricture wasn't dealt with. My guess is that the obvious blockage overshadowed the more subtle stricture, and due to the hospital process, that I didn't get to speak to my surgeon directly before the operation in person, but to an assistant, the information seems to have been miscommunicated or overlooked or ignored. Now I'm back to where I am before. However, I still have the suprapubic catheter in place because I insisted that I wanted a backup in case things went wrong again. It gives me 4 to 5 weeks of grace before the tube needs to be removed or replaced. I could have lived with something that looked bad as long as it worked. However, I seem to have both something that doesn't work and from the perspective of inside the vulva also doesn't look great either. It has left me very depressed. I'm happy that the penis is gone, but the emotional and physical cost is really quite high. If I'd known beforehand that I'd be one of the unlucky ones with complications, then I'd have chosen to have a much more simple bilateral orchiectomy, aka castration, instead. 2 other things of note about surgery issues. My skin and flesh appears to be generally difficult to work with according to my surgeon. It was apparently notably difficult to stitch together, tears easily and bleeds profusely. I also seem to be prone to keloid scarring. Had I known that beforehand, then it would also have put me off this operation. I knew what the risks were. I had already researched them before signing the medical disclaimer. In order of severity, I had fistula, urinary problems, lack of sensation, poor aesthetics in my mind as the problems I could have from worst to livable. I will have to have another operation to deal with the urethral stricture, but at my age, mid-40s, surgery at this level is incredibly physically taxing. I'm absolutely shattered. The thing about sex reassignment surgery is that you will probably be fine. You might be one of the lucky ones and everything is great. It's a lot of work with dilation even if things go well, but if things go wrong, how good is your surgeon at dealing with that? And do you have the mental strength to be poked and prodded and disappointed if things go wrong? Once you're on this path, you can't get off it. You have to see it through and live with the consequences. This might seem silly to point out now, but it is very different reading those words to having to experience it. I am in Germany and I have another meeting with my surgeon in 1 month. I will see what they have to say about the situation. German is a foreign language for me, so dealing with the doctors in German is sometimes a struggle. I have to research everything and then find and remember the medical translations. It makes it challenging. I scar easily. I wouldn't be surprised if I have scarring internally that is possibly pushing on the urethra and narrowing it. The urethra has been shifted, so any number of things could have gone wrong. I need to do more research on how this kind of stricture can be fixed. Thank you for sharing your story. We seem to have had very similar experiences. The situation you describe of trying to reopen the urethra was very similar to Mike. It left me extremely mentally scarred, not just physically. It felt like a brutal and intimate violation, and I continue to have flashbacks to that event. I will message you privately if I make any progress here in my country with this problem.
Have you considered trying tamsulosin, Flomax, to help with flow? I'm currently taking it to help relax my bladder and prostate muscles. I wish I could turn back time and undo my surgery. I'm really sorry with what you're going through. It makes me sad because we do share those similar experiences. And please keep me posted on your progress. Have faith and stay strong, girl.
Unfortunately, the person from Europe never responded back, and their Reddit account has been since deleted. We will never find out what happened to them. Do you believe any of these regret and complication stories were ever included in any kind of medical or scientific studies? If person whose quality of life has been drastically reduced due to complications from medical transition self-cancels, who should be held accountable for a life lost?
Had my catheter removed at about 2 weeks post-op. Had too much swelling to see, not even a trickle came out, and because I drank a lot of water to pee, I was so bloated, lol. Was really painful. Still couldn't pee after a few hours, so catheter was inserted back in, went home, and was instructed to remove it after another 2 weeks. Did so, and I could pee fine again. Did I actual morons downvote me for sharing my experience?
I had issues after my catheter was first removed as well. Couldn't pee, was in severe pain and started projectile vomiting. Ended up being recathetered in the ER where they drained 2 liters of urine. I think that trauma has had long-term effects on my musculature. As in, I'm constantly in spasm, which makes dilation and sex almost impossible. Seeing a pelvic floor therapist now, 2 years post-op.
Holy shit, that sounds intense. Best of luck to you.
I think it's important to get this info out because now I'm hearing more and more that post-op women are needing pelvic floor therapy. It was a little-known option up until very recently. The complaints about the surgical trauma have always been sort of anecdotal and treated as whining, when in fact they are actual treatable complications. Good luck to you as well.
Thanks for sharing. I had a similar experience where I was unable to urinate after my catheter was removed and ended up going into the ER room where they had to reinsert the catheter back in me for a week and a half. It was extremely traumatizing. I ended up having to get urethral revisions because of my situation. Also, do you ever feel that you have to urinate frequently and that your bladder isn't completely empty?
Yep, also had pain while emptying bladder, but I assume that was my stomach incision. It does get better after a week or two, though.
The original poster has not posted on Reddit in 3 years. I hope they are still alive and found a way to thrive. Just a reminder, this video simply voices over the Reddit post and some of the responses and is not meant to be used as medical advice. If you believe you have been harmed by medical transition or want to help those who have been harmed, you can check out some links in the description of this channel. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Please, don't forget to subscribe, share, and like to raise awareness and to help me out.